Chuck Black, and this is the Age of Ingenuity, our weekly chronicle of Canada's current innovation economy. And here's what's happening. Twitter insists that their employees were manipulated by sinister outside hackers who took over hundreds of Twitter accounts last week, scooping up private data and bitcoins while making a nuisance of themselves. And we're going to take a look at that.
I'm Alan Calder, and I always thought you couldn't be the hacker unless you wrote code and made it do something. Now I'm confused, and we're going to talk about that.
I'm Brian Orlotti, and I'm interested in Jim Balsillie, a Canadian businessman and philanthropist who is a pillar of our innovation ecosystem. He's got some new plans for intellectual property, and we're going to talk about that. But I'd also like to remind everyone to like, comment, share, subscribe to support this vidcast on Patreon and PayPal. When you're finished, here are the stories we're currently tracking. And our first piece comes from Vice's Motherboard, titled Hackers Convinced Twitter Employee to Help Them Hijack Accounts by Joseph Cox. A Twitter insider was responsible for a wave of high-profile account takeovers on Wednesday, according to leaked screenshots obtained by Motherboard and two sources who took over accounts. On Wednesday, a spike of high-profile accounts, including those of Joe Biden, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Barack Obama, Uber, and Apple, tweeted cryptocurrency scams in an apparent hack.
While this is the most current social media breach, I think it's important to note that, at least according to the April 17, 2020 CSO magazine post, the 15 biggest data breaches of the 21st century, there's been lots of others, bigger ones, lots of bigger ones. Adult Friend Finders, which was a service kind of like Ashley Madison, but bigger. Ashley Madison has been hacked. eBay, Equifax, something that shocks me a little bit, Heartland payment system, which is a $6.6 trillion in revenue global payment processor, at least according to their Securities and Exchange Commission Edgar filings for last year. LinkedIn and lots of others. So what do you guys think about the latest one?
Oh, okay. Well, first off, I would agree with Chuck that while this is very high profile, certainly due to the accounts involved, it's nothing earth-shattering and it's nothing super financially damaging on the scale of Equifax or Ashley Madison or Target. Very high profile, high dollar value damage attacks that in many cases are swept under the rug or kept very low profile on purpose. I mean, I'm not a great fan of Twitter to begin with, so I'm a bit biased. But yeah, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that big a deal, were it not for the celebrities who've been hacked.
I would suggest the problem is if they keep happening to these breaches in these companies listed then again and again, what are they fixing then? Like, why are these companies doing the same thing again and again? Like Heartland data system, the data breach for Heartland Systems, who I sent you a couple articles for, Chuck, just prior to going online, right?
Oh dear, I will include them in the show notes.
I figured that. One 2008 and one 2015, the same thing. And they both times had better plans for how they're not going to happen again.
Oh wow.
I feel less confident about it then. Maybe in 2025 when they have a breach, I'll feel more confident they have better plans somehow.
Maybe, I think that's quite possible. I would say that at least in this case, Twitter is arguing that the hackers didn't really hack anything. They just bribed a Twitter employee to give them all the passcodes. So I don't know if you can solve that problem. I'm also concerned with some articles that talk about national security concerns relating to the hack. Articles like the July 16th, 2020 Ars Technica post under the title, Twitter lost control of its internal systems to Bitcoin scamming hackers. And they argue that the hack raises serious national security concerns because of the potential it has to sow panic and chaos. For example, if somebody took over US President Donald Trump's Twitter feed, and they didn't this week, but if they did and started tweeting out things like, we now declare war against China, or we now declare war against the Russians, and who's to know how long it'll take to gain control of what's going on? It could really sow panic and chaos.
Agreed, and it's really telling about the times we live in that Twitter is now considered a tool of a national policy and a national voice. And also what's very telling is a national voice in a medium that doesn't allow more than 100, what is it, 100 characters, 120 characters?
I thought they went from 140 to 220 about 2 years back, but I'm not positive about that.
That doesn't change anything really for the point Brian's making, you know?
Yeah. I also note the July 18th, 2020 Cointelegraph post, Crypto Twitter Hack Recap, a wake-up call for centralized platforms. I really like Cointelegraph because they talk about the deep state, they talk about spying, they talk about all sorts of neat things. And they're arguing that the future of the internet may reside in open source distributed social media networks like Mastodon or Minds or Steemit, but not Twitter, because Twitter is so easy to hack or bribe someone to get the information out of, and Twitter can really, really easily mess things up.
Twitter should not be a publication of record. I think that's a really, really bad idea.
Me too. I have trouble believing the New York Times is a publication of record. Imagine how I feel about Twitter.
You know, the only ones that believe that the New York Times are the publication of record, but they're not alone though. A lot of people still respect them.
But the problem with Twitter is that it is by design not a forum for rational reasoned debate. It's sound bites. It's emotional. It's tailor-made for emotional knee-jerk reactions and feuds, and it's just.
You can only have so many monosyllabic words in 140 or so characters.
Yeah, I agree. I've also heard stories about how something called mesh networking is supposed to be able to bypass not just centralized authority, but the actual internet. It transmits over the phone lines like things we had 20 years ago. And it's really wild. I referenced the February 2nd, 2020 Help Desk Geek post. What is mesh networking and how does it work? And Brian sounds like he knows how it works.
Well, I mean, really, it goes back to like the 1980s BBS days when you would have, you know, bulletin boards on a server, and you would dial one with a phone number, and then that would dial another one with a phone number, and you would link them all in a chain, and you know, you didn't need the internet at all. You just go over phone lines.
Yeah, that might be 5 years from now. That may be the future. YouTube, Twitter, Facebook may go the way of MySpace because they're not really durable or reliable. They're not something we can trust.
Yeah, I by the way, I do remember those BBS system days though. That was a lot of fun actually.
I agree too. We played some really good games on some of those things.
That's what I meant. That's really what I meant. If there's anything more than that, I didn't know about it.
Yeah.
So for Brian, or Chuck as well, for Mesh Network, are there any companies I could put my teeth into so I can see what it means then?
Absolutely. I referenced the November 8th, 2019 News 18 post, Mastodon, Social X, and more. Best social media alternatives to Facebook and Twitter. I'll include the link in the show notes, and it gives you a list of 6 or 7 companies that are dealing in that area right now. A lot of them are affiliated with Bitcoin because Bitcoin seems to fit with this thing. Bitcoin is mostly a distributed network as well. And I also referenced the March 20th, 2020 Bitcoin Magazine post from ISP to P2P, how mesh networks take Bitcoin off the grid. And again, those are included in the show notes. I also fear that, at least according to our research, an awful lot of journalists use Twitter. And for that, I referenced the March 12th, 2018 My News Desk post under the title, How Journalists Use Social Media to Sort Stories and Disseminate News. So journalists, they got a 6 o'clock deadline. They get up, they go into the office for 9:30. They look at their Twitter feed, and then they find out what they're going to write about. They don't even need to go out of the office.
It is it's the ultimate soundbite machine.
Maybe. I mean, 240 characters, you can get a good soundbite out of that. You can get 15 or 20 words, easy.
You get sound bites and no serious analysis or reflection, knee jerk, and stoking, you know, to use the old term, flame wars. I don't know if the kids still use that term, but
You sound so old.
What's,
Yeah.
I'm not too much older than Brian. What's a flame war?
It's a term that goes back to the BBS days where guys would get into arguments over stupid shit or profound shit, and they would argue back and forth, tit for tat, just like on Twitter. Only it was on the BBS, and it was just in plain text.
Oh, gotcha, man.
I would also note it, something that I've actually loaned to you in the past. Talks about the media ecosystem. It starts with Twitter. It goes to blogs. It goes to local journalism. It goes to national journalism. It's the 2013 Ryan Holiday book. Trust me, I'm lying. Confessions of a Media Manipulator. It talks about how you can use social media to affect blogs. Blogs are always really short of money, so you can give blogs free stuff and they're happy, and then they'll repost it. And they'll send their articles out on social media, and those articles will be picked up by actual real journalists who have a deadline at 6 o'clock. So they'll write whatever they can find easy.
It's Chuck. That, by the way, that Chuck has given that book to not just myself but other people. It's a seriously important book, I find, for real. Because beyond what you said, they have to go one step and then let the other journalists do the other step. They can find out where New York Times source articles, what those crappy blogs are. They'll post there and they'll be let on for nothing.
Yeah.
And they'll be found, right?
I also can't help but notice from the political perspective, the July 19, 2020 Rebel News post, Twitter hackers, Bitcoin scam reveals hidden social media blacklist. It mentions that Twitter has shadow ban buttons and an ability to hide politically unpopular posts that they've intentionally lied about to places like the U.S. Senate in the past. So this seems to be obvious prima facie evidence that Twitter can shadow ban and block important messages getting out if they really wanted to.
It doesn't seem to be viable in the long term, and you can only, how do you monetize, presidential temper tantrums and flame wars between Mike Pence and the Iranian minister of whatever. I think he got in a Twitter fight with the Iranian parliamentary speaker or something. Yeah, and it was just after the Black Lives Matter protest started, and Iran was posting links of U.S. police brutality and their deliberate infiltration of protests and violent tactics. And then so they say, so you're not you claim to be, free and democratic, but look at this. And then Mike Pence retweeted back, you stone homosexuals.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
This is the level of debate that
on Twitter. Before we drop this topic, I gotta note one other topic that I find personally concerning. Scientific research suggests strongly that Twitter affects your brain. After a while, you don't just function within the constraints of Twitter, you begin to live within the constraints of Twitter. Sorry, Brian.
So your thoughts are limited to 240 characters. God help us all.
I noticed specifically articles like the February 5th, 2015 Wired post. This is your brain on Twitter, which noted an increased sense of personal engagement, maybe angry, more memory use, and an emotional intensity when you use Twitter too much. So we all get angrier.
Yeah, well, some of us are angry all the time anyway then, but this might bring it out more, right? I guess.
No, I agree 100%. I also noticed the November 9th, 2017 Esquire post, how is Twitter affecting your mental health? It notes that social media is affecting our attention span. We tend to focus on the first 240 characters everywhere. Twitter affects our self-esteem and our ability to sleep. So we also got to be careful about that. It tends to fry our brains and it doesn't allow us to rest or relax.
And the anger is nothing new. I mean, it's just taken to the next level. I mean, message boards, discussion boards on websites have been doing it for decades now, where people get into flame wars and argue back and forth and insult each other and make false claims and just get really emotional. And this is just the logical progression of that. Now it's just dumbed down flaming.
Yeah,
And
you know,
it's super quick now, though, is a difference. Very quick, and people are on it all the time, 24/7.
Yeah.
Right? You
No,
can't
I
see
agree.
Exactly.
To that point, I note the February 6th, 2019 Psychology Today post. Addicted to Twitter. Here's why. The article notes that Twitter is highly addictive. It triggers you. It alters your behavior. It gives you a reward for the right behavior. It's just like nicotine. It's just like alcohol. It's just like any other vice we got. And it's also worth noting that nicotine is regulated and alcohol is regulated, but if your parents want you to go away and leave them alone, they say, log on to the internet, look at Twitter or Instagram or one of those things.
And our next piece comes from the Government of Ontario website. Province launches Intellectual Property Action Plan. Made in Ontario plan to help generate, commercialize, and protect the value of homegrown ideas. From the Office of the Premier. The Ontario government announced the province's first intellectual property action plan following the recommendations made by the expert panel on intellectual property. The plan will drive the province's long-term economic competitiveness by prioritizing the generation, protection, and commercialization of intellectual property.
Very cool. I think it's noted further on in the press release that the plan will be headed by Jim Balsillie, the founder of Research in Motion, the chair of the Council of Canadian Innovators, and a fixture on the Canadian innovation ecosystem. Is that a fair assessment of the situation?
He's the man with the right credentials and experience.
He's not left the news, I noticed, to be fair, right? And he's doing Research in Motion. That's a big deal.
Yeah, as I recall, the space industry, which we used to cover a long time ago in a galaxy far away, Balsillie was head of a consortium that bought back McDonald Detweiler from those Americans about a year ago.
Yeah, parts of it, I guess, would be a better way to say it, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. Parts of it. Balsillie has also done a number of interesting things recently. I noticed the July 16, 2020 BetaKit post. BDC commits $160 million to fund IP development in Canada. That article notes that Balsillie initiatives have been gaining steam over the last year. In February, an Ontario expert panel led by Balsillie released a report focused on improving and streamlining Canadian intellectual property regulations. My understanding is that report informs and guides the Intellectual Property Action Plan, and Balsillie was in charge of both. And BDC, because of that plan, is contributing money for new businesses focused around intellectual property. And I also note a long time ago, last year, the April 23rd, 2019 Maclean's Post, Jim Balsillie emerged from retirement with a mission to save Canada's tech sector. He initially emerged from retirement to launch a battle against Sidewalk Labs, which I think he won. Brian, whatever happened to Sidewalk Labs?
Well, they withdrew their proposal to develop Toronto's waterfront, and they blamed it on COVID-19, like so many others these days.
Balsillie has been moving a lot of his fortune into the private ecosystem to fund startups. He's dragged Google into town. He's dragged a lot of other venture firms into town, so they take notice of what's going on over there. He's perceived of as doing good work. Although I would argue that U.S. big tech is moving into places like Kitchener, Waterloo, not so much because of people like Jim Balsillie arguing that there are great companies to be found there. That the U.S. tech giants are moving into Canada to find junior employees they can move to California.
I was going to say, Chuck, we went to some entrepreneurship meetings kind of idea then, with the whole whack of investor types, and I didn't see him there. You know, and that's
Well, he can't go to all of them.
Oh, maybe you're right. Maybe he goes to the other ones I don't go to then. But there was a lot of those guys you mentioned there though, and they will be snafu'd up soon enough, for real.
Yeah, I think a lot of them will end up in the States. What do you think, Brian?
I agree, and you know, it's like Hollywood North, right? They're just an extension of the Hollywood machine in California, and companies like Google here, they're the extension of the Silicon Valley machine.
And we have very porous borders with the States too, though. I mean, I've worked in the States for years, you know? It's not that hard. If they want you to go, that's all it is.
Well, I understand that recently that's changed. Donald Trump has, he's blocked all new, I mean, it doesn't really matter because the election's coming soon, but I mean, if he wins, it matters. What's it called? The special visas, the H-1 visas for tech workers?
I had H-1N1 visa myself.
I had one of those too. My God, is it small world.
Well, what a small world. Everyone goes from Canada to live to work in the States. But Brian's probably right about Donald Trump saying he'll do different things. Not sure if it's effective policy at the moment, but he does say he will all the time.
He does say he will, and he'll probably run that as a campaign promise, because there are a lot of people in Texas, a lot of people in California who believe their jobs are being taken away by foreigners like you and I, who will work cheap.
America for Americans. Don't forget it. And those are the stories we're covering this week. As always, the articles we've referenced are listed in the show notes. Keep in touch with us on Facebook, Gab, LinkedIn, Minds, Pinterest, Steemit, and Twitter. Check out other stories we're tracking on our innovation news and upcoming events Scoop It feeds. And remember to like, subscribe, share, and comment on our posts. Your actions will feed the algorithms and bots which help to distribute our stories.
And if you'd like to promote your event or your activity, or if you think you have insight into Canada's current innovation economy, then please send me an email. I'm at chuck.black@protonmail.com.
And we're currently on YouTube, BitChute, and Vimeo, and hope to be on other platforms soon. If you like the content we create, send some money to our Patreon and PayPal accounts. We appreciate your patronage.
And that's all for this week. Check out our comments and insights from associate producer John Pentern. And remember, we'll be back next week with more stories covering our current age of ingenuity.